Hey friends, Sean from SGTReport.com and SGTReport.tv here. As I'm recording this interview with my friend, my longtime friend, Lynette Zhang from ITM Trading, it is Thursday, the 22nd of October, and at 11:07 a.m. this morning, after a 3+ year relationship at Patreon, my account was terminated without cause and without warning. Patreon has taken it upon itself to sever my relationship with more than 1,000 patrons because they changed their policy today and then retroactively started purging channels they say violate their new policy. Friends, I don't know what to do at this point. On October 15th, as you all know, YouTube purged the 2 YouTube channels I had that were in good standing, and they severed my ability to reach 745,000 people. People who subscribed to me of their own fruition. Patreon has just done the same. Lynette, welcome. I'm dropping this on you in real time because I want you to go through it with me. This is getting very, very difficult to process because many of us in the truth news space are now having war waged against us, obviously and overtly. Lynette, your reaction to this onerous, unbelievable censorship by big tech?
I'm pretty much speechless, which doesn't happen very often, and I'm getting chills because I think that it's telling us what's coming. I mean, they're censoring everything, they're tracking everything, and if you don't agree with them or you don't like if they don't like what you're saying, they have the ability to do this. And what's the recourse?
What is the recourse? I don't know. Like in a world where there was actually justice with, actual judges that would deliver justice, one thinks one could sue. But of course, these are privately owned sites and they make the rules up as they go. As I said, they changed their policy today. Let me show you this.
This is unbelievable, Sean. It really is.
Well, it is unbelievable. Many of us saw it coming, but look, I thought because Owen Benjamin and his bears, people that were patrons of his, were having success against Patreon in arbitration court because they did the same thing to him. They changed their policy and then retroactively started to terminate people's Patreon pages. I got this today, 11:07 a.m. Central Time, 9:07 a.m. Pacific. Hello. Charlie says, "Hello, Sean. My name is Charlie, and I'm on the Trust and Safety team here at Patreon. I'm writing to inform you that your page has been removed for violating our community guidelines. Following our policy update today concerning QAnon accounts, Patreon can no longer support accounts that engage in spreading QAnon-supporting disinformation. Because your content falls within this realm, we can no longer allow your project on Patreon." Now, wow. Lynette, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to just say a couple of things. First of all, this attack on quote-unquote QAnon, which doesn't exist. There's Q, the Q page, and the Q drops, and then there's Anons that do research. They've conflated it to call it QAnon, but here's the point. I didn't have a QAnon page. I merely talked about the things that Q has suggested we research, like the enemies of freedom want to dismantle the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But beyond all of that, when YouTube took my site down, when YouTube took my channels down on October 15th, all of the videos I had on Patreon went away because Patreon uses Vimeo and YouTube for uploading or for embedding video, right? Vimeo had already banned me 2 or 3 weeks ago, and YouTube just terminated all my videos, so there was nothing on Patreon for them to take this action today. It was all scrubbed. So this is clear-cut collusion. By the way, MailChimp did away with my account on the 19th. PayPal did away with Amazing Polly's account the other day. This is clear-cut big tech collusion, Lynette. It's absolute fascist tyranny, the likes of which we've never seen in this country.
No, it's the power in just a few hands, because there's clearly just a small group behind all of this, and people think it's, okay to just give up all of their rights and all of their privacies and all of their free speech. I don't think I want these guys determining what I can and cannot say.
Well,
It's scary, Sean. It's scary.
Here's what's terrifying about it. What these companies are saying, and YouTube is the world's largest town square, and it's owned by Google, the world's largest and most powerful website. What these big tech tyrants are saying is that if they don't like the conversation you and I are having, they can purge us. Because keep in mind, YouTube and my subscribers, they subscribe to me.
And that's what they're doing.
Yeah, well, my YouTube subscribers subscribe to me of their own free will and fruition. And every time I posted a video, it got 98 or 99% likes from the people who subscribed to me. And YouTube purged my channels saying that my content was harmful to viewers. Well, what viewers? See, this is the problem. This is why it's called tortious interference, Lynette, because YouTube, the third party in that case, was interfering with my relationship with my subscribers, just like Patreon has done with me and my patrons. Patreon just broke the contract between me and my patrons. What right under the law do they have to do that?
I can't even say. I mean, there is no freedom of speech, but I guess if it's a privately owned company, what, you can do anything you want? Or if it's publicly held, Google's publicly held. But it's still controlled. There's two different kinds of shares there. So they just determine what's okay. They're the ones.
Well, the bottom line here, friends, is that big tech wants us destitute and they want us silenced. Okay? This is less than 2 weeks out from the election, and this is absolute collusion and election meddling, and it's also economic warfare. Friends, I will not go gently into that good night. I will not give up. You have to keep in mind that my friend Ryan Hartwig and Zach Voorhees, okay, Zach is the Google whistleblower, Ryan is the Facebook whistleblower, and we are raising money to file an emergency injunction against Google to get all of those YouTube channels that were purged on the 15th reinstated. All right, I'm not messing around here. They want a war. If YouTube wants a war, they're going to get a war. If Patreon wants a war, they're going to get a war. I just need to figure out who to talk to help me wage this war, because I will not give up. I will not cower in a corner. Lynette, it's not in our nature. We're patriots. That's why we talk about real money. That's why we talk about the real enemy of the people, the Federal Reserve, the funny money printing, the criminal banks. All right? I've got a fire in my belly because I've been doing this for 10 years, and I built something very special, and these damn companies are burning it all down like Antifa is burning down storefronts.
Yeah, it was easy to do, though, because they push a button and you have no recourse. You know, okay, who are you going to talk to? Who are you going to call? Who are you going to go against? And you can wage that war. You know, I mean, I hate to say this, Sean, but they have really deep pockets. And they have really strong connections. Who does this really benefit, taking down the truth? Who does this benefit? That's really who the war is against.
Well, ironically, we can move on in a second, but I just want to make the point specifically as it relates to Patreon. It certainly doesn't benefit Patreon, the company, whose only job it is to be the middleman for an exchange of donations or support from the audience, the patrons, to the content creators. That's their only job. They have no business in political speech or in the interference of speech. That is not their job. Their job is to be a middleman and to provide the way, the mechanism for patrons to support content producers. That's it. That's their only job. And friends, if any of you have any ideas, if you know any attorneys, if you know any attorney generals, if you know anything about how we can take this fight to Patreon, just like we are taking the fight to Google, please let me know. You can email me directly at sgtreport@gmail.com. All right, my friend, Lynette Zhang, the economy. I have something I want to share with you in a second, but first I want you to bring us up to speed on what you're seeing. But Klaus Schwab and his great fascist reset, boy, is the World Economic Forum and these demonic bankers, boy, are they ready to bring us something quite bleak. What are you seeing right now?
Oh my God. What I am seeing is over this past weekend, they restructured or reset $80 trillion worth of derivatives into the new, what they call the risk-free rate, which is a joke, but into the new, in this country, the SOFR. And it's eerily silent. I cannot find anything about the results of those auctions. And this makes me really nervous because they've laid out a timeline for this conversion. But here's the thing, Sean, there's 600, this is from the ISDA, the International Swaps and Derivatives Association. So the banks that create this mess and determine when something defaults and controls all of this. But according to them, there's $640 trillion worth of derivatives. They only got, they've been furiously since 2012 when they were told that the IBOR's interbank offer rates were going away the end of 2021. And all the central banks, well, not all of them, but a handful of the central banks created an alternative benchmark rate. They have only gotten $5 trillion worth of participation out of 640 trillion. And I think it's really interesting that when Fed Chair Jerome Powell had the opportunity, when they were loaning out all of this money in Main Street lending and all of these contracts that they were pushing out as they were creating all of this funny money to stimulate the powers that be, I find it quite interesting that he did not push that forward then, but they are pushing it forward now. And I got to tell you, the fact that I cannot find anything on it scares the bejeebies out of me, because it's a big fat experiment. But they've laid out the timeline. So they're the new fallback language enabling the lender to automatically convert the contracts to the new risk-free rate. That goes into effect on October 23rd. So they pulled the experiment this week. I got to back up here. You got me going too, because on October 1st, the Department of Justice gave the ISDA the green light to go ahead. So then over this past weekend, they did the 80 trillion. On October 3rd, the fallback language is ready. And on January 25th, I never give a date unless whoever I'm looking at gives me the date. On January 25th, coming up, that's when the conversion will begin in earnest, because it has to be done by December 31st. And I don't know, $640 trillion worth of derivatives that have to be converted. Well, I'm sorry, 634. And that's notional, which means nobody knows what the real value is at risk. That's in the quadrillions. So I think that what's happening to you, to be perfectly honest with you, and others that are trying to tell the truth, I think we're so close to absolute collapse and them losing control. They don't want the truth out there, so they're hiding it. And they're crushing it if they can.
All right. Well, I didn't know about the $80 trillion of derivatives being reset. Before I continue, because what I'm seeing is far more bleak than I imagined the last time we talked, and we're going to get into it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, really, what they have coming, Lynette, is nothing short of a dystopian nightmare of slavery in perpetuity. I'm really concerned about what I'm hearing coming out of the Canadian Parliament. But you said on January 25th, the conversion will begin because it has to be done by December 31st, 2021. Is that right?
Yes.
And this is a conversion of what? Derivatives?
Of all contracts. Yeah, all derivative contracts, but all contracts. But the contracts that you and I sign already have that language in there, giving the lender the right to convert to the new rate, the new benchmark rate. So we don't really have any rights. It's those 640 notional value derivatives that jeopardize the entire system. Because every time they convert, whenever they do a conversion, and this is what they were, I don't know the results of this past week's auction, but in order to neutralize the impact, when they convert from this rate to that rate, the value of those contracts automatically changes. Automatically, because you're going against a different benchmark. And so to neutralize the impact and make it so that nobody would need to go do a fire sale on these forced fire sale on these contracts, it's easy to hide it with all the money printing that's going on by the central banks. they were going to pay anybody, any entity that had losses, they were going to make up those losses so that they weren't forced to sell them on the market. Sean, this is really bad, and this is really, really, really dangerous, because how in the world can you do that on $640 trillion worth of big, fat bets? Because that's all a derivative is. It's just a big, fat bet based on the price action of the underlying. And 73.5% of those bets are on interest rates, interest rate related. And you've got interest rates that have been held anchored near zero for 12 years.
Let me ask you something. When we talk about derivatives, it's very much a invisible entity. It's nothing that really impacts you or me in our real lives, right? So the derivatives.
No, I would not say that.
Well, but just let me. I know. It's all wrapped into the banking system, and we're all reliant on the banking system. And a debt is an obligation.
And all the contracts.
I get it, but here's the problem:
Okay.
the derivatives thing. This is all funny money between banks. This is all an economic system that's been built. Look, everything's been hypothecated and rehypothecated and buried, and nobody knows what anybody owns, and that's why you and I always talk about the importance of owning physical, tangible assets, silver and gold. But here's the problem. With this COVID, I'm not even going to call it a hoax, but whatever this COVID excuse is to shut down the economies of the world, it appears to have a very nefarious purpose. Yeah. They know the whole system is unraveling. Yeah. So they want to cause an economic calamity. By the way, when you shut down people's businesses, that's an economic calamity. The people that had their businesses, their restaurants, their health clubs, their bars, their hair salons all shut down. Many of them still do. They're suffering just like I am today, just like we all are when we have our social media accounts terminated by big tech pirates. So here's the point. We are hearing from people in the Canadian Parliament that what is going to happen is there will be a new system that will roll out on the back of another COVID crisis. I guess you could call it Wave 2. They're talking about COVID-21. This has already been put in black and white. And they're talking about loan forgiveness for your mortgages, your credit cards, all your debt, courtesy of the IMF under a new program. This is people in the Parliament of Canada have read these documents and they're freaked out because evidently there are internment camps being put up in Canada where people will be taken, even those who aren't sick. But here's the thing. If you accept the debt forgiveness from the IMF, you have to give up all your personal property in perpetuity. So the rest of your progeny will live as slaves. Okay? And you have to take whatever vaccines they roll out. You have to become a serf. Lynette, if what I'm hearing from these leakers in the Canadian Parliament, if that's correct, this is far worse than you and I thought just a couple of years ago. When we thought about a collapse, we thought, well, there's going to be a reset, and then maybe we can have honest money, and we can all move forward in liberty. That is not the globalist plan, Lynette.
No, that is not. And I'll tell you something else, Sean. When this whole thing started to blow up, I went into the Wuhan lab and I looked at their reports. And, look, I can't prove that this was planned, but they knew about it. They helped create, and I'm talking globally. It wasn't just China. It was globally. It was entities in the US and Europe, all over the world. The scientists helped create this superbug, and they had gorgeous flow charts showing how it would transfer from animals to people. So, I hate what you're saying so much I can't even tell you, but that is still the importance of having physical gold and silver out of the system, because what else are you going to do to protect yourself? How else are you going to pay off those debts so that you are not obligated to sign off on the IMF? Because they know when people are desperate and they're hungry, you give them a little crumb and they'll take it because they don't think they have any other choice. That's disgusting, Sean. It's disgusting. But I hate to say it. It sounds awfully true. And this, I can't prove it, but it's awfully convenient, and the timing of it was awfully convenient. and how it's pushed everybody online is awfully convenient.
What is your outlook for precious metals in an environment where everything is crooked? All right, you and I have talked about this for a long time.
Yeah.
I've often said, where is the reward for those of us who have been prescient enough to buy physical silver at an historically lifetime cheap price because of the suppression? How does this end? What are you seeing right now for those that hold precious metals?
Honestly, what I'm seeing is, especially when you look at how much the central, and look, do we really know how much the central banks are accumulating? Not really. But even the reported amounts, when you see how much they're accumulating, they're preparing for a full-blown reset. I don't know about the loan forgiveness unless, like you said, then you have to make this commitment and you have to take the vaccine. But what I see for precious metals is they have to reset the debt, because even if the IMF forgives it, so much of this debt has been securitized, turned into financial products and sold back to pensions and all of that. So it would be, so they're still going to have to reset this debt, get it repaid with fiat that has zero value. And that means that the price in terms of fiat, which I really hate to do, it's more about the opportunities, because you're going to have such a small, I mean, there already is, such a small percentage of people that actually own and hold physical metals. If you got an ETF, good luck to you. That's a contract. That is not real physical. You've got to have the physical. It's got to be out of the system. It's got to be in your possession so that you can convert it when you need to pay off those debts, so they can't force you into that position. And you're only going to have a small group of people that actually can do that. And it's the people in the know. Like 1965, suddenly, magically, 1965, gold contracts were legal again. How many people do you think knew about that? Just the guys that write the laws, just the guys at the very top. You couldn't convert them into gold then, but you could buy them at $35 an ounce. So who do you think benefited? And I think that we're going to see something very similar, but you got to do it with the physical. You have to be as independent, and you know this, as independent and self-sufficient as absolutely possible. Food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. We've got to have those things. We've got to, or we're all in trouble, even those of us that own gold and silver.
Let me ask you something. I know you don't like to talk about politics, so I'm not going to put you on the spot as it pertains to Hunter Biden's emails or his hard drive and the fact that the mainstream media refuses to report about it. In fact, they're covering it up. Of course, I reported about it, and the next day my YouTube channels were suspended. But let me ask you about what happens if President Trump somehow loses. By the way, explain to me how that could happen when Biden shows up and 22 cars show up for one of his rallies. Meanwhile, President Trump has 30,000 people. But that aside, if President Trump loses, what is your outlook for the stock market, the economy, and the future of our nation under a Biden-Harris administration and those policies?
Well, Sean, I'm going to tell you, I think that no matter what, we are at the end. And there isn't any politician that can make this outcome any different. So what we really probably need to look at is who can help the best in this transition, because it's too late. There is no saving. The system died in 2008, Sean. It's just been on life support. And you know, I don't think that there's any way out of it, period, no matter who gets elected.
But in your view, if Biden and Harris take control, we're going to see the Green New Deal. We're going to see all sorts of things that, in my view, can only accelerate the destruction of our economy and that will propel us into more of a globalist government than if they don't get into power.
I will agree with that. And in fact, I did a report recently where it was showing, you know, a lot of the problem that's been happening is that we've also been breaking down from the globalist system and going to a more nationalist system, which I was there in the 80s as a new stockbroker and everybody was talking about it. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, I don't really think this is going to be such a great benefit for most people. So I'm going to absolutely agree with you that we need to do something to avoid that globalist agenda. Because if the IMF, I'm going to do a piece on this, I haven't done it yet, but if the IMF is ruling over everybody, I'm sure that those countries that have experienced that kind of control can tell us how not nice it is for the population. It's nice for the few. Heck, those at the IMF don't ever pay taxes anywhere because they're above the law, unelected officials. So a globalist agenda is, in my opinion, not a good agenda. I like a nationalist agenda much better because we need to support, we need to be local, we need to support each other and the jobs and the prosperity that it can bring. And once, if you look at the average workers' share of GDP, once we went to that globalist agenda, this is off the top of my head, so I could be off a bit on this, but I can tell you this, it has declined dramatically. It has enabled that have and have not, and the income and wealth inequality that we're seeing today that has gotten exacerbated just since March. So I am definitely in agreement with you. I do not like the globalist agenda, and I know that that's the direction that some parties would take us in, and it wasn't good for us in the 80s, and I don't think it's good for us in the 2020s.
All right, well, we can wrap this one out with one last topic, and I think it's important just to always circle back to the real enemies of humanity. Let me ask you this. If the banksters, and we don't have to name the families specifically, folks know who these families are, but if these banksters who devised the scheme several hundred years ago of storing people's gold and handing out promissory notes on that gold, but then when they realized only 1 in 10 people would ever come back and redeem their notes for their gold, they thought, well, we can issue 9 times more notes. They invented fractional reserve banking, Lynette.
Yep.
And when we had precious metals at the banks, which the banks no longer have, Wells Fargo doesn't have any gold or silver in the vaults to back up all the notes in circulation. But these banksters devised the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, the printing presses, the central banks. And now we have all of these derivatives, we have all of this money that's been created, we have all of these billionaires that own these corporations that are now silencing we the people. The banksters have bought up. Look, George Carlin told us they own everything of importance. They own it all. It's a big club, and you and I ain't in it.
Exactly.
Lynette, what kind of world would this be, or could this be, if we could just do away with the banksters and go back to something honest? Honest money, gold and silver, get rid of all this debt, because they bought up everything and now they have so much power because of the debt they created, and now they can bring it all cascading down on us.
Yeah. If we could get rid of, I mean, there's really no reason for a Federal Reserve, especially with the technology and all the blockchain. Quite honestly, we the people can have a much more direct voice. And if we could do away with this fractional reserve system, then people would actually have to go out and work and get an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. That was the beauty of the gold standard, because it takes labor and effort and energy to pull gold and silver out of the ground. So when we were on that, it was labor for labor. It was a fair system. And governments that wanted to tax and spend, well, you know what? They had to answer to the people. Or even when we were on a gold standard, they'd go in and pull the gold out of the system and create restrictions. Also, it created fiscal responsibility. There's no fiscal responsibility anymore. It's a joke. So if we could do away with them and go back to a more fair system, then it would be better for we the people, and maybe we wouldn't have ourselves silenced. They'd love to silence all of us that speak the truth.
Well, that's certainly what they are in the process of doing right now. Friends, again, we're trying to raise money for that lawsuit against Google. We have an attorney ready to go. She's already working on it. Friends, we have already raised in 24 hours, let's get an update here, $52,057 of our $130,000 goal. You can visit.
Sean, make sure I have that link. I want to donate.
You got it, Lynette. Thank you very much for that. I just want to say one thing about those who have donated. Friends, I get emails all the time, and I used to get comments under my YouTube videos all the time from people who would say, enough is enough. We need action. No more talk, action. You've laid out the problems. Now offer us solutions. Now here is an actionable solution. An actual lawsuit against Google and YouTube for their fascist tyranny. And I just want to point out that my interview with Zach Voorhees on BitChute now has 23,800 views, which I'm very grateful for. But the support on GoFundMe for our emergency injunction against Google only has 1,200 donors. Think about that, friends. If you claim you want to get in the fight, then get in the fight. If the 23,000 people who watched the video on BitChute had each donated $10, we would have raised $230,000 in 24 hours. Instead, we're at $52,000 with only 1,100 donors. So I just want you all to think about that. You say you want action, you say you want to fight, you say you want to stand with those of us who are fighting, then please, stand with us. Because those of us who have been speaking out against these tyrants, against this fascist system, against the globalist system, we're getting crushed. We're being crushed right now. All right, we just lost Lynette too, by the way. So my thanks to Lynette Zhang at ITM Trading. You guys can find her there. And my thanks to all of you for tuning in. I guess at this point, my last line of defense is SGTReport.tv. That is where all exclusive content, all content, gets put on SGTReport.tv, where we have a secure server. I'm also working on trying to get set up on Subscribestar to replace Patreon. I'll keep you posted on how that goes. Thank you so much for tuning in, friends. SGTReport.tv, SGTReport.com, and of course here on BitChute and Rumble. Thank you so very much. God bless. Bye-bye.